And good morning. And if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to stay down here because I'm a pacer when I talk. Welcome to my adopted hometown, Washington, D.C. Intelligence in this town is debatable, artificial or otherwise. It's currently in a bipartisan committee. We're trying to sort that out about whether there's intelligence in this town or not. But we have great restaurants, great monuments, great history in this town. So while you're here, take advantage. There's great restaurants around. There's lots of great things to see here when you're on your own tonight. And I'm going to grab my clicker here. So I'm Rick Bawcum. I'm the CEO of Cimatri, the founder. Our organization works exclusively with associations and nonprofits. So the organizations like BMI, we work with hundreds of them. We happen to be located in the DC area organizationally, but we are scattered all over the country. We have people in Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, DC. So we are 100% virtual. And AI is the topic du jour. We spend a lot of our time talking about artificial intelligence. I've got a long history. There's a couple of things that you probably should know about me. In terms of technology, I'm a techno-optimist. Over my lifetime, which is now long, and hopefully getting much longer, there's a lot of technology in my world that has come to my rescue in some cases and certainly made my life easier. My father was an employee of IBM back in the 60s, so I spent my weekends in the data center coding, right, because it was fun to me. And so I was kind of one of the original digital natives. So long history in the technology space, been through associations and nonprofits recently, healthcare, telecommunications, banking, financial services. I am an AI governance professional, so you'll hear me talk some today about governance and what we need to do to use it effectively, efficiently, and reliably. So enough about me. I was a contributor to this book, Ascend. If you want to know about AI and associations in particular, it's a great book. You can go to my LinkedIn page and download it. It's a free copy. So our agenda today, we're going to do some definitions around AI. You probably, as you made your way to this conference, interacted with AI more than you know. Right? If you used a GPS to get here, if you looked at your iPhone or your Android in terms of figuring out what the agenda is, if you use the Whova app, there's all kinds of things in terms of predictive analytics and things behind those kinds of applications. You probably used AI a lot just on your way to this conference, and maybe even since you got up this morning. So we're going to talk a little bit about what AI is. How many of you feel like you're an AI expert? That's kind of what I usually get, right? I never raise my hand on that because there's so much happening in the AI world every day. I talked about I've been in the technology business for about 50 years now, believe it or not. These gray hairs are real. And I've seen it all. The personal computer, the internet, social media, big data. I've seen all of that happen in my lifetime. I think artificial intelligence is the most transformative technology that's come out in my lifetime. So, and the great thing about it is it's going to be virtually in everything. We were talking this morning about Grammarly. I think somebody at the back table uses Grammarly a lot. You're going to see artificial intelligence embedded in everything that you use that's digital. So more and more that's going to happen. It's not something you necessarily have to go out and become an expert on, but you will see it in everything that you use. Then we're going to talk about some of the limitations of artificial intelligence. What can and can't it do? It's kind of the title of the session today. What is it? What can it do? What can it not do? We tend to be, as techno-optimists like I am, we tend to get into this hype cycle. Oh, it can do everything. Well, it can't. There are some limitations that we'll talk about. And then we'll talk about some of the emerging trends in AI. And so what I thought I would do is, it's often a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And 1,000 words is worth whatever it's worth, right? I thought I would start off with a video of some of the cutting edge technology. Anybody know who Reid Hoffman is? Founder of LinkedIn, founder of Pi, creates a lot of AI products. There's an interesting thing that just came out last week where Reed has created an AI that is trained on all of his podcasts, publications, speeches, all of that. And what the idea behind this is Reed AI is interviewing Reed real person.
Why would I want to be interviewed by a digital version of myself? Well, great question. Reed AI, introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm an AI-generated version of Reid Hoffman, his digital twin. My thinking and everything I am saying comes from a custom GPT that is based on 20 years of Reid talking and making content. So I've read all his books, watched his speeches, and listened to his podcasts. I think it gives me a pretty good sense of how you approach the world, Reid.
So first, I'm going to challenge Reed AI with some questions to see what it can do and how good its content is in mirroring what I might say.
Then the tables will turn and I will challenge you with some questions about AI and tech.
Of course, there's a second question, whether or not I'll answer.
Well, okay. Challenge accepted.
Let's get started. Let's take a real piece of work from me, blitzscaling. I wrote a 336-page book. And how do you explain it in one sentence? To a smart person, to a 5-year-old, well, for the Star Trek fans, in Klingon, and as Jerry would explain it in Seinfeld.
Okay, condensing your entire strategy from a 336-page book into one sentence, and starting with the explanation for the smartest person in the world. Blitzscaling is a strategic acceleration of organizational growth to seize market dominance by prioritizing rapid expansion over efficiency, leveraging capital and network effects to outpace competitors in winner-takes-all markets, despite the attendant risks to scalability and operational stability. Now, for a 5-year-old, blitzscaling is like building the biggest tower super fast before anyone else, even if it gets a bit messy, so you can be the leader of the tower game. And now for a Klingon, blitzscaling pus vittelheg duj luchar glutavistelhab a dochvam viol, hawk competition vipo qa market dahara. And finally, like Jerry, in a Seinfeld episode, blitzscaling, it's when a company decides to floor it on the highway of business, ignoring the speed limit, racing to be the first to that big golden market share in the sky, all while hoping they don't run out of gas or, hit a tree. It's like, who cares if we're burning cash like it's a bonfire? We're getting to the front of the line, baby. Efficiency? Please. That's for those in the slow lane watching us fly by.
Great set of answers, even if the first one reminded me of business school bingo, which I'm not quite sure I would have done that, but a very, I wouldn't say compact sentence, but a very long sentence with a lot of words. And, again, one of the things where you have a superpower that I don't, I have no idea what the Klingon stands for. So who do you think is a better video host, me or you?
I may excel as a video host for content with extensive data, frequent updates, or multiple languages, thanks to my ability to process and present information accurately without human limitations like fatigue or language barriers. However, for engaging personal storytelling and meaningful discussions, Reed, you're unmatched as a host.
You delivered it all kind of in a very, for me, I can give you all the long, straight scoop, but you do the emotions.
That is very helpful feedback for me to have. Thank you.
So even though you're trained on my content, do you make mistakes? And what do you do if that happens?
If I make a mistake about you, it's often because I misinterpreted the information you gave me, or I don't have the full context of your question. And I see mistakes as learning opportunities. When I get something wrong, I rely on your feedback to correct my understanding.
So let's change tacks a little bit. What about my LinkedIn page? Could you give me some advice on that?
Well, I have gotten a chance to take a look at your page as an image of it was entered into my GPT. I think your current photo nails it, but you could strengthen your LinkedIn page by spicing up your banner with imagery that screams innovation, like your books or podcast logos, and update your profile with the latest projects for a dynamic appeal and enrich your activity section with AI and entrepreneurship insights to solidify your industry presence. Last thing, enhance your digital introduction by adding personal flair to your headline and summary, possibly with investing in the future of technology and humanity. What do you think?
It definitely could do with a refresh. I think you're right about that. The art that's the top of it was actually a piece of art that a friend of mine made. You might not know it if you didn't know about that art. Now, the question about headlines, that's probably a good one, and remembering to keep humanity in the loop with that is probably something that, I'll give some consideration to changing the headline. So what role should governments play in regulating AI, and especially fostering innovation, because the future is so important?
In discussing AI regulation, governments must balance fostering innovation with maintaining ethics, encouraging global, cross-disciplinary collaborations, and staying flexible in policymaking to match technology's rapid evolution. There's a need for a framework that not only fuels innovation, but also ensures AI benefits are fairly distributed, all while focusing on enhancing public good.
So the content is absolutely right. And I probably would have used a few less business buzzword bingo sentences or phrases, but the content was exactly right.
All right, I want to move on. The video goes on like this for another 10 minutes or so. I won't bore you with all of it, but it's a great interaction between all of the disciplines of artificial intelligence, right? You've got machine learning, you've got voice recognition, natural language processing, avatars, so it's creating, this is a fully AI-generated read on the left side, so it's taken videos of him and recreated them. What do you think?
I thought it was really creepy.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
As a parent with kids, the thought if I have daughters, younger daughters, and somebody can imitate me and get on the phone or video with them and tell them to meet them somewhere, it scares the shit out of me.
Absolutely, yeah. Other thoughts? Any applications for this in things like education or communities? Those are the kinds of things that Reed goes on to talk about. People, myself included, you'll see some of that in the rest of the presentation. We tend to go to the things that are bad that can happen. In my experience, PCs were going to end the world, right? Social media was going to end the world. The internet was going to end the world, right? Those were all the kinds of conversations we had. I think this is that on steroids, right? Exactly what you're talking about. The thought of having a virtual me out there saying things that I don't believe in is pretty frightening, right? And certainly, as I said earlier, living inside of the Beltway, this is a hot conversation here. What role do we play in that? I think there's some onus upon us, right, to take this on and pay attention to this. And whether you're an AI expert or you're an AI user, you need to be involved in this somehow. You need to be thinking about this because the momentum is there. It's going to be in the things that you're using, right? So hopefully we'll raise some awareness about that today, and you guys can make your decisions about how you participate. So what is AI? The classic definition about artificial intelligence is it's training machines to act and think like humans or to produce responses. Thinking is probably a stretch, but it's creating responses that are indistinguishable from human output. So anybody use ChatGPT? I think so a lot of the interactions with that are, again, pretty frightening, right? Because it seems very much like human beings, like it responds. So let's do a little exercise here. Somebody tell me the next word. Mary had a little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. So why do you know the next word? You learned from data, right? You learned this nursery rhyme when you were a child, and you repeated it over and over and over. And if you were to search across the internet, there's probably Mary Had a Little Lamb, Whose Fleet Was White as Snow out there all over the place in every child story kind of format. That's basically what ChatGPT is today. It's a next word predictor. It's less scary in the sense of it takes a couple of things to make it work. One's a lot of data, and one's a lot of computing power to make those things come together in the way that you see ChatGPT. We tend to we put a halo around technology oftentimes, which I think is unwarranted. And we'll talk about kind of the effect of, we get into these hype cycles about technology. And then what we figure out is that over time, it takes time for it to normalize and play out. But so the classic definition is we're comparing it to humans. Now, I don't know about that standard because frankly, I know some humans that I'm not sure. Anyway, so there's some things in there where you say, hey, the benchmark is it behaves and acts like humans. I'm not sure about that benchmark. But back in 1956, 7, 8, somewhere in that time frame, they had a big conference at Bletchley Park in the UK, and they came out with the Turing tests. And that's kind of the standard. It's Alan Turing, was kind of the father of artificial intelligence. And they said, hey, we're going to measure artificial intelligence against the standard of indistinguishable from human output. So that's the standard. So there are some misconceptions about artificial intelligence, right? And probably the one that's the most frightening these days is it's going to replace every one of us, right? That human beings are going to be replaced, our jobs are going to be replaced. There will certainly be impacts on the workforce. If you are using Grammarly as part of your writing activities today, you're probably doing it faster than you did before Grammarly, and Grammarly has AI built into it. If you're using ChatGPT, you may be staring at a blank screen less time when you're doing your content generation. Is it going to write War and Peace? No, right? Because there's some things about AI that aren't human and never will be in terms of having empathy, understanding context, and be able to do problem solving on a complex level. At least in my lifetime, I don't believe that's going to happen. So there are some common misconceptions about AI. Anything else what scares you about AI? We heard one thing, or are there other items or other things that kind of worry you about this AI stuff?
I would be concerned about the reduction in human interaction that we are facing. More and more conversations happening with machines, check out at grocery stores and other things. I think it's just not good for social and life together overall. Yeah,
and I think that's made worse by things like the pandemic. Drove us all into hiding for a while, so the social interactions maybe even worse. Anything else? Bias is a significant problem because AI learns from, people have heard about it eating the internet. It just consumed all of the content that's on the internet. So if there's bias in the data that it learned from, the bias is going to be represented in the output from AI. And one of the things that I've learned is that it's important how you ask the questions, how you do the prompting. Anything else?
Protection of intellectual property.
Intellectual property, right? You used to be able to, I don't think you can do it as much anymore. You could ask ChatGPT to write something in the voice of someone. Why could it do that? Because it had consumed all of the content out on the internet. You could say, write it in the voice of Jane Austen, right? That's less so now because of the lawsuits that are out there, and they pulled some of that stuff back. I still think there's a lot of gray area around intellectual property law, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. It's a pretty gray area in terms of the legal standards. Anything else?
Global bad actors coming in and impacting elections.
So disinformation, misinformation, yes. We're seeing that already, right? No matter which side of the political spectrum you may find yourself on, deep fakes they're reality. They're out there already. So people saying things that they don't believe in they're manipulated as a reality. And today, in this election cycle, we're going to have to deal with that. What about creativity? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it encourages lazy thinking. People don't take responsibility for their own critical analysis of things if you rely upon AI to tell you what the story is or what the situation is.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is my PhD wife, who's a PhD in communications, reminds me all the time about it's all about critical thinking, right? Know your audience, know the topic, think critically about the subject, and respond accordingly. Machines are not going to do that. Again, there's kind of two inputs to this. There's massive computing power and massive amounts of data. And the quality of the data impacts the quality of the responses from the AI, whatever version you're using. Great responses. Anything else anybody wants to toss out there?
It's a really interesting conversation that happened last night talking about books, actually. We were all, what are you reading, and what's your next book, what's your stack tonight? And someone said there's a sense of mourning when you get to the end of the book, and you've been living with these characters for such a long time, and now you have to let them go. And then the progression was, well, what if AI could become those characters, and you could continue to have conversations with them past the end of the book, and it would extend the life of the experience and make it even more immersive. It was both frightening from a copyright standpoint and a human creation, but if it was a tool that could be used by human creators who can take Pottermore and everything that is thrown out is very common. The idea is sitting down with the mind and having a question and answer session.
Yeah, Reed talks about that a little bit further on in his video about the legacy. Because remember, the AI is going to outlive him, right? And it's been trained on according to him, everything he's written or published or whatever. Now, does that mean it knows everything he's thinking? No, but it's going to outlive him. That digital presence is going to be there forever. So lots of misconceptions, lots of perceptions around AI and what it's doing. It is, again, the most disruptive, transformative technology I have seen in my lifetime. For good or bad, a jury's out for me about where this is going to go. So, but my imploring you is to pay attention, right? Certainly you're paying attention to it in the industries that you serve. So this is going to be a disruptive transformation. So a little bit of history here. I called this from Gutenberg to GPTs. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. That's what ChatGPT is. We'll talk a little bit in a minute about how those work. You've already done a little bit of a demonstration. It's a next word predictor. So from my perspective, this is all about information. As human beings, we want to consume information. Why? Because we have survival instincts. We have instincts about our growth and things that we want to do to improve our world. We have social interactions that we want to promote. We want to consume information for the benefit of ourselves and the people around us. So, I mean, starting all the way back to the Gutenberg printing press, something you guys are intimately familiar with, I'm sure, that was what started to democratize information, right? Before that, books were limited in their ability to produce lots of them. The printing press kind of made that a mass consumption vehicle and started to democratize information. If you move forward 500 years or so, we talked about the internet. I can remember a time before the internet, right? When we had computers, they were mainframes. They sat in air-conditioned rooms on top of a raised floor. We used punch cards and mag tapes and things like that to program them and do our work. The first computer I ever worked with was a Burroughs computer that had 19.2K, not gig, of ferrite core memory. We didn't worry about power failures because it literally magnetized the intersection of the wires that made it a 0 or 1. Power went off. We didn't care. It stayed magnetized. Power came back on. It just picked up where it left off. But 19.2K of ferrite core memory, a 10 megabyte drive was as big as the tables in front of you in terms of its storage capacity at 10 meg. That was considered a massive amount of storage, right? So the internet came along. The storage capabilities just multiplied, and Moore's Law, anybody know what Moore's Law is? Right? The density of semiconductors doubles every 2 to 3 years, and the price falls by 50% in the same time frame. So Moore's Law came out in the 50s, and it's held true, right? So the fact that you are holding in your hands computers that are thousands of times more powerful than the first computer I worked on in a commercial enterprise, right? So we ran a savings alone with 30 branches on 19.2K ferrite core memory and 3 10 megabyte disk drives. And we had thousands of accounts. So, but the phones that you hold in your hands today are orders of magnitude more powerful than that, which gives us the ability to use things like ChatGPT and machine learning and those things in your hand. So Moore's Law accelerated things. Siri and Google now bring natural language processing to your iPhone. Anybody have a great experience with Siri when it first came out? Me neither. I stopped using it because I kept having to repeat myself. Well, try it again today. It's probably better than it was. But that's all fundamentally natural language processing. It's doing speech recognition. It's learning how to process what you're saying to it and give you a response. So that all came out in the 2011, 2012 timeframe. In 2015, 17, a number of kind of game playing things happened in terms of IBM and Google and those folks really moving the bar forward in terms of artificial intelligence. And they chose a gaming strategy because it fundamentally uses machine learning and reinforcement learning. It's kind of one of the roots of artificial intelligence. It was easier to say, learn this game, right? And become good at it because the environment was very contained. All it had to do was learn how to win that game. So those things happened in 2016 and 17. And then in 2018, we saw GPT-1, which was the first large language model from OpenAI. Reid Hoffman was a part of the founding of OpenAI, as was Elon Musk and Mustafa Suleyman, others who have now kind of spread out and gone to lots of different places and are continuing to work on artificial intelligence things going on there. So when you think about what's happened in AI, there were a couple of components that came together. You first had computing power, massive amounts of computing power. Again, thinking about my first computer in a commercial world was 19.2K of memory and 30 megabytes of hard drive. Now you've got 10 times that or more on your iPhones. That compute capability has taken off exponentially. Not a linear curve, it's an exponential growth in computing power. The same thing happened to the internet. If you were around at all in the earlier days of the internet, it was pretty slow. Anybody remember dial-up modems, right? You remember that sound, right? That, oh, it's making a connection, right? And you were getting 1200 baud. We thought that was fast, 1200 baud, right? So the connectivity, the speed of the connectivity has gone up exponentially as well. And the third component of it was the amount of data storage and how free it was. When I used to work for Verizon Wireless back in the 70s and 80s, we spent millions of dollars on disk storage space because we were taking in call detail records and stuff on millions of them a day. And we were filling out rooms bigger than this with storage, right? Now you can buy that stuff. I don't know what a 100 gig drive costs anymore, but it's dollars compared to millions of dollars, right? You can go down to the Best Buy here and buy a 100 gig thumb drive, essentially, that you can, for a few dollars, $20 probably less. So those three pieces, the compute power, the connectivity, which is the distribution channel, right? You think of the internet as a channel for distributing content, whether it be books or blog posts or websites, and then the storage capacity. Massive amounts of storage capacity. So exponential growth in all of those three things is what's made AI come on the scene as forcefully as it has. So all of those things have happened and exponentially growing every day. I spend 3 days out of 5 learning and studying artificial intelligence. And something new comes along every day. Not just some new feature, but like you see, it's hard to describe how transformational that Read video is, because it brings together computer vision, natural language processing, all of the components, machine learning, all of those components are in that video. Now that's not available to the masses yet. In 6 months it will be, right? So frightening, yes. Exciting, yes. Pick your poison. Capabilities of AI. We've talked a little bit about some of these things. What's underneath the hood, if you will? Natural language processing is what ChatGPT does. It's what for us has kind of put us into cross the Rubicon, if you will, of being human, right? We communicate as humans through language. right? So when we started being able to communicate with ChatGPT through language, this is like humans, right? So natural language processing is certainly a component of AI. Image recognition, so computer vision. Anybody got a Tesla? I can't afford one, so I don't know. But Teslas they combine everything around this, right? Voice recognition, computer vision, massive amounts of data processing. All of that is as well as robotics are in your Tesla. So your Tesla can see the road in front of you. It can use data that it's processed from history about what to do in certain situations, and those things are part of that vehicle. And then machine learning is really the secret sauce for all artificial intelligence. Machine learning is looking for patterns, right? All of us have done probably spreadsheets or documents where my wife's a communications person, so she will go through interviews and do research, and she'll go back and with those interviews, she'll do coding. Anybody done that as a researcher? It's got these words and these thoughts and these concepts in it, and then she puts those things all together to produce research. So machine learning is a similar concept. It takes a look at large amounts of data and looks for patterns in that. So those are kind of the core capabilities of AI. So again, back to how ChatGPTs work. Again, generative pre-trained transformers. This is, again, the technology that lives under ChatGPT. It's fundamentally the language processing feature. So we talked about what it stands for, and it's a type of machine learning model. Again, back to finish the sentence, right? Mary had a little lamb whose. You think about how you fill those things in, you know from repetition and from data that the most likely word to come next is whose fleece was. ChatGPT is doing the same thing. It's literally a predictive model around probabilistic algorithms. So it's saying, hey, what's the probability of this word coming next, or this word coming next, or this word coming next? And it picks the one with the highest probability of what comes next. It's doing it at lightning speed. If you watch ChatGPT when you're interacting with it, it's like, wow, that's pretty fast. It's responding kind of the way you would expect it to respond if you were in a conversation with someone. It is a neural network, which is just a technical term for a tree of possibilities. So these predictive and probabilistic models are saying, here's a tree. You might hear somebody talk about ChatGPT having a context window. So these context windows are trillions and now billions of bytes in their width. Basically, it's what's my knowledge base, and what am I drawing on, and how big does it get? So these big models, large language models, anybody ever heard that term? Well, now the hot term now is small language models. How do I make them very narrowly focused? So they're pre-trained on vast amounts of data. We talked about storage. It takes a lot of high quality data to make sure that you're not hallucinating or you're not producing more bias because the data that you've been trained on is biased. So paying attention to the data is critical. You can fine tune these models so that you can say for example, our company is a consulting firm. We deal with associations and nonprofits. It's a pretty narrow market. We know how those things operate. Matt's familiar with how you do accounting in the association world. There are very specific guidelines about how those organizations operate. We've trained GPTs in our consulting practice to know that context. So, hey, this is a nonprofit. Here's how they do business. They're a trade association. They're a professional association. All of those contexts are in this. So our business analysts now can talk to these GPTs to get started on doing analysis around a new client. So you can train these things specifically to be narrow or wide. Large language models are wide in their context. You can fine tune them, and it's used to create these impressive language models. Now, the language model that Reed used in the video was trained on 20 years worth of his books, his podcasts, his speeches, his websites. So it was very narrowly focused on Reed. So if you asked it a question that was outside of the context of what Reed has written about or learned about, it wouldn't be able, it would make something up, right? So that's called hallucination. The limitations. We talked some about this as I went through this, the technical limitations, the reliability of these things to create accurate output has gotten better. I will say this, I don't run into it making things up very often. But a year ago, when it kind of exploded on the scene, I asked the GPT, which was GPT-3 at the time, so what do you know about Cimatri? My company, right? And it came back with a response that said, Cimatri's a financial services institution serving blah, blah. It was just some litany of stuff that didn't have anything to do with what we do. That's improved. I can ask it now because it's now been out and consumed more of the internet. It knows who Cimatri is. It knows what our audience is, and it knows more about our target markets. So it's gotten more accurate, but back in those days, it made stuff up if it didn't know the answer. And why does it do that? Because it knows, again, it's using this model of predictive, probabilistic, what's the next word, right? So it just goes through and says, okay, well, this looks like a good word to pick there, even if I don't have context. So there's a lot of limitations around that. AI is not human, never will be, in my view, at least not in my lifetime. So it doesn't know things like nuance, right? If you use ChatGPT or one of these tools, ask it what's love. What does love mean, right? It's an ambiguous word. It's probably the most ambiguous word in our language, right? So if there's a lot of ambiguity around what you're asking it for, it's going to make something up. Or it's going to draw from whatever context it has. And it may not have the right context around what is love. The data limitations. We talked about the massive amount of data that's needed to train these models. So the quality of the data, the context of the data, those things are limitations around AI in general. So what it's not sentient is the word that I used here. So it doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't have emotions. It may seem like it does sometimes, especially if you say things like please and thank you when you're talking to it through ChatGPT, but it doesn't have any of those. And it can't replace human beings entirely. I will predict, I'm not alone in this, that a massive amount of the workforce and the jobs and how we do work is going to be impacted by AI. It just is. If your job may not be replaced by an AI, but your job may be replaced by humans using AI, right? So if someone's using it to create content and they stay in the loop, meaning that they're making sure that the answers you get are accurate based on what you would say, then it's going to have an impact on the workforce. And we need to do some things about how to protect workers in that space. Cultural and social implications, I just talked about this. We're going to have some job displacement and creation. Now, the techno-optimists tend to say, hey, it's going to create as many jobs as it destroys. I don't know, jury's out, right? It may destroy jobs faster than it's creating them over the long haul. Maybe it creates more jobs than it destroys. I don't know. I think the jury's out on that topic. Somebody said bias and inequality is one of your concerns. Inequality in terms of access to this. Not everybody is still in 2024, not everybody has access to a computer, to a smartphone. Children in certain places, certainly in certain places around the world, but even here in the United States, children in school don't have access to the internet. So that's still a problem. So there's some inequality of access. Privacy and authenticity we brought up. Who owns it? How is my content protected? I write a lot, so I want to make sure somebody's not stealing my content, or at least that they're giving me attribution for the content that I write. Impact on social interactions. We talked about deep fakes. Whether it's your daughter being misrepresented on the internet or a politician, there's certainly implications there. And artistic creativity, I think there's a lot of concern about where does creativity go, right? If everybody's using an AI to write or create content, where does the human creativity, where's that spark go? I don't know. The jury's kind of out on that. And then widening the digital divide, again, kind of talking about access to these things. Legal considerations, there's data protection laws that we have to worry about, ownership of AI-generated content. In the United States, if content is generated by AI, you don't own it. That's just the way content or trademark law and intellectual property law works in the US. Now, the jury's out about if I change it enough, how much do I have to change it to make it mine? But it's fundamentally a problem about where that ownership lives today. And emerging legislations. I live inside the Beltway. Again, there's a bipartisan committee for everything here. My experience in the technology business is that legislation and regulation will be far behind this topic for a long time to come. Emerging trends, we've got the large language models and language processing is only going to get better. You saw that as an example in the Read video. We're going to see increased use of robotics. I don't know if you guys have seen the Boston robotics videos at all, but those robots are getting pretty frighteningly close to being able to do stuff that humans can do. Certainly they can do things in plants and manufacturing environments that humans don't want to do or can't or shouldn't be doing. And then personalized content across the board. The AI is going to get smarter about you. You guys see this all the time. When you're on Amazon shopping, it knows what your patterns are, right? And it's going to suggest a bunch of stuff. So the future of AI in publishing, we're going to see a lot more automated content creation. We're going to see some automated editing. I use this tool now. Grammarly is a good example of that. A great example of where the AI is just going to start being built in to what you use every day. It's not going to be much of a choice about whether you're using AI or not, right? It's going to be built into those kinds of tools. And then data analysis. These context windows and the ability to analyze massive amounts of data is just getting bigger and bigger. Preparing for change, as it continues to evolve, my advice to you, my exhortation to you, my whatever you want to call it, is to pay attention, right? Be prepared for this change. You don't have to be AI experts, but you should be paying attention to what's happening out there. Managing expectations, Roy Amira, who's one of the kind of thought leaders in the technology space, he said, hey, we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run, and we underestimate its effect in the long run. So all that's saying is, if you ever looked at Gartner or any of those, there's this hype cycle. Oh, it's going to take over jobs, it's going to take over our life, it's going to replace humans. That's probably a little overhyped. Over the long haul, I'm not quite sure where it settles in, but it's that long tail on what's happening with AI that we need to pay attention to. So focus on the long term around this.
I'm back here for Q&A. Don't worry.
You're back here for Q&A. Great.
I'll use the mic this time.
We got about 6 or 7 minutes. Questions? Happy to address anything. Yes?
Hold on, Ashley. I want you to use the mic this time.
By the way, this is my LinkedIn profile if you guys...
So in trying to determine if what AI is telling you is accurate, could AI be programmed to be self-aware? So for example, in the read conversation, it wasn't always right. Could Reed have asked his AI self, what is your assessment of how accurate that answer was? Is there anything that could be built into the technology where it says, I feel like I'm really making this up. I'm giving you an answer, but I'm thinking 50-50, I got this right. It's like, how can it self-assess so that you're not entirely reliant on the receiver of the information knowing whether or not it's accurate?
So you're asking a question that every technology billionaire is asking themselves right now, is how do you make it self-aware? Because it's one of the human characteristics that AI does not have. It doesn't understand complex situations. It doesn't understand context, and the context it understands is based on the data that it used to be trained. So I'm going to fall back to what my spouse keeps telling me about writing, right, in a professional context, is to make sure you're got the human in the loop, right, and that you're citing accurate works that have been vetted, right? So if you come from an academic background, you do peer-to-peer reviews, you look at, what your colleagues are saying about what you've put out as knowledge, and you're seeing more and more of the chat bots start to create citations. So now, instead of just taking it at its word, which was what we had to do when it first came out, because it would come out with a response and I'd be like, I don't know, right? I'd have to base it on my personal experience and my judgment. That wasn't always accurate. So now you're starting to see more of the chatbot type tools create citations at the end of the response that you can go dig into further. Reed actually asked the question in the video later on about, he says, I'm not sure I would answer it quite that way. So what do you do when you make a mistake? And what the Reed AI says is, I see it as a learning opportunity, right? So if you correct it, the AI will get smarter, right? It will learn more about how you would respond. So it's a question that we're all asking. How do we make it more self-aware? Anything else?
Joe? Two questions. The first one is, can it do software programming? Can it write code? So design a workflow for my print company.
Yes.
Okay.
The answer, and it's actually one of the things it excels at. Okay. When you think about coding, it's language.
Yeah.
It's a specialized language. And I'll give you an example real quickly. We had somebody in our organization that was having problems debugging something that they wrote, right? And they spent days on it. And so they uploaded it to ChatGPT and said, where's the problem? And in 30 seconds, it came back and said, oh, you missed a semicolon here. Right? The classic coding challenge, right? So the answer is yes, it excels at writing code. It can write websites, it can, anything that's language-based, and coding is essentially language.
The second question is, you said to stay informed for us. So how do we do that? What sources, how do we stay informed on AI?
Read my blog. So I think there are, if you're on LinkedIn or any of the social media platforms, find some authentic kinds of groups to listen to. I think there are lots of, I spent a lot of time at MIT, the Sloan School of Management, and so I subscribe to all of their publications. You can pretty much trust, those kinds of sources. So MIT, Harvard Business Review, those kinds of authentic sources around this topic, because they're all asking these questions. And there's a longer form response to these kind of questions when you subscribe to those kinds of sources. There are a lot of there's a lot of BS resources out there too, so be careful. But I would look for authentic resources out there.
Well, sorry, Sean, I'm not walking that far for the next one.
Next up. All the data that is generated, what is the implications on energy and the environment?
Lots of them. And I think what you will see, these technology billionaires are investing there. They're focused a lot right now on the environmental concerns, because we don't see it in the DC area, but if you go out into rural areas, you see massive data centers being built everywhere. And those things are huge consumers of electricity, right? So there's a lot of stuff written out there that you can pull up in terms of what does ChatGPT, what's its impact on the environment? It's huge. It's huge right now. But they're focused on trying to make it better.
How do we manage the bias of data? All data has some bias for the most part. We've seen this on some of these early launches. How do we use AI to manage the bias of that, or how do we? I mean, there's been some big hiccups at the very beginning of this on the data and the bias. How do we police that?
I think this is opinion versus maybe fact. What is bias? Bias is an opinion you don't agree with. Bias is, but there are some standards, right? Whether it's the Economic Forum or what, they have some standards about gender bias, racial bias, bias in the workforce. There are some definitions that we should, as AI governance people, we should put those frameworks in place in our organizations. So if you're in an organization and you're allowing is probably too strong a word, but if you're using AI or your workforce is using AI, you should have guardrails around what's our policy, right? So what's our policy on gender bias? What's our policy on racial bias? What's our policy on political speech? What's our so just like you would have any kind of HR policy around those kinds of things in the workforce, you should extend those things into how AI interacts with that. I think that most organizations of any size are going to have an AI group, like they have an IT group, right? Or they have an IT service. So it's a complex question because I think the definition of bias, depending on what room you're in, might have varying definitions. Is it speech? Is it speech that doesn't agree with me? Or speech, I don't know. These small language models that Reed's video is a good example of. It's biased towards what Reed trained it on, right? So if he has an example of how to handle it, it's based entirely on what Reed's perspective is around how to work with AI. So complex question, and that's this space in its entirety. Is these questions are complex. They are not going away. This is a general technology and that it's going to be in everything that we use ultimately. So we need to be paying attention. So keep asking that question. I don't have a pat answer for it.
All right, last one.
Oh, mine was just, it was a follow-up to my concern earlier. So what is the priority for safety right now for children relative to what's happening with AI? And I'll give you an example. I live in a small town, Westfield, New Jersey, and we had a recent incident with AI where there was a young lady. They took computer-generated images that were inappropriate and put them all over the internet. Now, fortunately, she had a strong mother, and they got together, they got in front of it, and it didn't end badly. But what is the priority right now to protect children as this thing is moving at a rapid pace?
Yeah, I think if any of you are Taylor Swift fans, she could speak to what happens when the deep fakes occur out there. I think the priority needs to be right across the river over there in terms of regulating it. There needs to be some recourse in it. Today, our children and parents, as parents of children, it's a hard path to take any kind of action that's meaningful around these things when they happen. I think it's a huge issue that our regulators are going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, I don't know if they're going to deal with it in a meaningful time frame, but we need to be diligent about it. And I would extend that to be diligent with your kids, and not just the AI, but what they're on in terms of the social platforms, how they're interacting with it. I would have a hard time growing up in this environment today. And as the father of 3 daughters and a son who are now adults, they didn't grow up in this age either. It's a huge, complex issue, and I think we underestimate the impact that it has on our kids just to be in that pressure environment. I have grandchildren now who are struggling with these things. So, all right, I think we're out of time. I appreciate your time. Hopefully you've learned a bit, and thank you very much.